Question 1. System analysis indicates that the American University of Paraguay is considering the introduction of a new interdisciplinary master's program to ensure responsible institutional development and adherence to Paraguayan higher education standards. What is the most appropriate approach for assessing the potential impact of this new program? Option A. Conduct a thorough impact assessment encompassing academic viability, financial sustainability, operational capacity, market demand, and alignment with the university's strategic mission. Option B. Primarily focus on projecting potential student enrollment figures to gauge the program's revenue-generating capacity. Option C. Evaluate the program's financial costs and compare them against the tuition fees of similar programs offered by regional competitors. Option D. Analyze the course offerings of other universities to identify popular subjects and propose a program that mirrors these successful models. Correct answer is A. Conduct a thorough impact assessment encompassing academic viability, financial sustainability, operational capacity, market demand, and alignment with the university's strategic mission. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires an applicant to demonstrate an understanding of how academic institutions, specifically the American University of Paraguay, are expected to assess the potential impact of new programs on their existing academic offerings and resources. The challenge lies in identifying the most comprehensive and ethically sound method for evaluating such an impact, ensuring that decisions are data-driven, stakeholder-informed, and aligned with the university's mission and regulatory obligations within Paraguay. A superficial assessment could lead to resource misallocation, program quality degradation, or failure to meet accreditation standards. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a multifaceted impact assessment that considers academic, financial, operational, and market factors. This approach is right because it aligns with best practices in strategic planning and institutional management, which are implicitly expected of candidates seeking admission to a university that values rigorous evaluation. Specifically, within the Paraguayan regulatory framework for higher education, which emphasizes institutional responsibility for program quality and sustainability, a comprehensive impact assessment is crucial for demonstrating due diligence. It ensures that the university acts responsibly by considering all potential consequences before committing resources, thereby safeguarding the quality of education provided and adhering to principles of good governance and academic integrity. Incorrect approaches analysis. An approach focusing solely on potential student enrollment numbers without considering the financial viability or faculty capacity is ethically flawed and professionally unsound. It prioritizes potential revenue over the quality of education and the university's ability to deliver it effectively, potentially violating Paraguayan regulations that mandate quality assurance. An approach that only examines the financial cost of a new program without evaluating its academic merit or alignment with the university's strategic goals is incomplete. While financial prudence is important, it neglects the core mission of an academic institution and could lead to the introduction of programs that do not enhance the university's academic standing or serve its student body effectively, potentially contravening Paraguayan educational standards. An approach that relies exclusively on competitor program offerings without internal analysis of resource availability or unique institutional strengths is reactive and potentially unsustainable. It fails to consider the specific context and capabilities of the American University of Paraguay, risking the introduction of programs that cannot be adequately supported or that do not leverage the university's distinct advantages, thus not demonstrating responsible institutional planning as expected under Paraguayan educational oversight. Professional reasoning. Professionals tasked with such assessments should employ a structured, holistic approach. This involves defining clear objectives for the assessment, identifying all relevant stakeholders, gathering data from diverse sources, academic departments, finance, admissions, market research, analyzing this data against established criteria, and formulating recommendations based on the findings. This systematic process, grounded in principles of accountability and strategic foresight, is essential for making informed decisions that benefit the institution and its stakeholders, aligning with the ethical and regulatory expectations of higher education in Paraguay. Question 2. The monitoring system demonstrates a pattern of potential discrepancies in student enrollment data that could indicate a breach of internal data management policies and potentially Paraguayan educational record-keeping guidelines. What is the most appropriate initial step to address these findings? Option A. Publicly announce that the university is investigating potential data integrity issues to maintain transparency with students and faculty. Option B. Conduct a thorough internal review of the monitoring system's output, cross-referencing the identified discrepancies with existing university policies and relevant Paraguayan educational regulations to determine the nature and scope of the potential issues before initiating further action. Option C. Immediately report the potential discrepancies to the Ministry of Education of Paraguay, assuming a breach has occurred and requiring external intervention. Option D. Ignore the monitoring system's findings, assuming they are technical glitches and not indicative of any substantive problems. The correct answer is B. Conduct a thorough internal review of the monitoring system's output, cross-referencing the identified discrepancies with existing university policies and relevant Paraguayan educational regulations to determine the nature and scope of the potential issues before initiating further action. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires the assessment of potential impacts arising from a monitoring system's findings, necessitating a nuanced understanding of regulatory compliance and ethical responsibilities within the context of the American University of Paraguay's operational framework. The core difficulty lies in determining the appropriate course of action when a system flags potential noncompliance, balancing the need for thorough investigation with the imperative to act responsibly and efficiently. Careful judgment is required to avoid overreaction or underestimation of the situation's gravity. The correct approach involves a systematic and documented review of the monitoring system's output to identify the specific nature and potential severity of any identified issues. This includes cross-referencing findings with established university policies, Paraguayan educational regulations, and ethical guidelines governing academic institutions. The subsequent step of initiating a formal internal investigation, if warranted, ensures that allegations are properly substantiated before any external reporting or corrective actions are taken. This methodical process aligns with principles of due diligence and procedural fairness, which are implicitly expected of any educational institution operating under Paraguayan law and ethical standards. It demonstrates a commitment to transparency, accountability, and the integrity of the university's operations. An incorrect approach would be to immediately dismiss the monitoring system's findings without any form of verification. This failure to investigate could lead to continued noncompliance, potentially violating Paraguayan educational regulations and exposing the university to reputational damage and sanctions. Another incorrect approach would be to escalate the findings to external regulatory bodies without first conducting a thorough internal assessment. This premature external reporting could be seen as an overreaction, potentially damaging relationships with stakeholders and creating unnecessary alarm, and may not be in line with the procedural expectations for internal issue resolution within the Paraguayan educational sector. Finally, an approach that involves making assumptions about the nature of the issues without concrete evidence would be ethically unsound and professionally irresponsible, as it bypasses the fundamental requirement for evidence-based decision-making. Professionals in such situations should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes information gathering, objective analysis, and adherence to established protocols. This involves 1. Understanding the scope and limitations of the monitoring system. 2. Documenting all findings and the process of review. 3. Consulting relevant internal policies and external regulations, specifically those pertaining to Paraguayan higher education. 4. Determining the materiality and potential impact of any identified issues. 5. Initiating appropriate investigative steps based on the assessment. 6. Communicating findings and proposed actions through established channels. This structured approach ensures that decisions are informed, defensible, and aligned with both legal and ethical obligations. Question 3. Examination of the data shows that an individual involved in the administration of the American University of Paraguay entrance exam has a close personal relationship with one of the applicants. This relationship, if not managed appropriately, could create a perception of bias or lead to actual unfairness in the evaluation process. considering the university's commitment to academic integrity and fair admissions. What is the most ethically sound and procedurally correct course of action for the individual involved? Option A. Immediately disclose the personal relationship to the designated university authority responsible for exam administration and recuse themselves from any duties that could directly or indirectly impact the applicant's evaluation. Option B. Ignore the personal relationship and continue with their responsibilities, believing that it will not influence their professional judgment. Option C. Discreetly provide the applicant with advance information about the exam's difficulty or focus areas to help them prepare better. Option D. Proceed with their duties as planned, assuming their professional integrity will prevent any bias and avoid any direct interaction with the applicant. The correct answer is A. Immediately disclose the personal relationship to the designated university authority responsible for exam administration and recuse themselves from any duties that could directly or indirectly impact the applicant's evaluation. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to navigate potential conflicts of interest and ensure adherence to the ethical guidelines and academic integrity principles expected by the American University of Paraguay. The core of the challenge lies in maintaining objectivity and fairness in an assessment process while being aware of personal connections. Careful judgment is required to uphold the university's reputation and the validity of its entrance examinations. The correct approach involves a proactive and transparent disclosure of the relationship to the relevant university authority. This upholds the principle of avoiding conflicts of interest, a cornerstone of academic and professional ethics. By informing the appropriate body, the individual allows for an objective decision to be made regarding their involvement in the examination process, thereby safeguarding the integrity of the assessment. This aligns with the implicit ethical framework of any educational institution, which prioritizes fairness and impartiality in admissions. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with involvement without disclosure. This failure stems from a lack of transparency and a potential for perceived or actual bias, violates the ethical obligation to act in the best interest of the institution and its applicants, potentially compromising the fairness of the entrance exam. Another incorrect approach is to attempt to subtly influence the examination process based on the personal relationship. This is a direct breach of academic integrity and ethical conduct, undermining the merit-based selection process and the credibility of the university. Finally, ignoring the relationship and continuing as if it does not exist is also an incorrect approach, as it demonstrates a disregard for ethical considerations and the potential for bias, failing to address the conflict of interest proactively. Professionals in such situations should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes ethical conduct and institutional integrity. This involves first identifying any potential conflicts of interest. Subsequently, the individual should consult the relevant university policies or ethical guidelines. If a conflict is identified, the next step is to disclose it promptly and transparently to the designated authority. The decision on how to proceed should then be made by the institution, not the individual with the conflict, ensuring impartiality. Question 4. Assessment of a prospective student's ethical considerations when preparing for the American University of Paraguay entrance exam, given the availability of unofficial study groups claiming access to advanced insights. Option A. Relying solely on official study materials and resources provided by the American University of Paraguay for preparation. Option B. Participating in unofficial study groups that claim to possess advanced insights or prior knowledge of the exam content. Option C. Obtaining and reviewing leaked exam questions from unofficial sources to familiarize oneself with the format and potential topics. Option D. Discussing specific exam questions and potential answers with other applicants during the preparation period. The correct answer is A. Relying solely on official study materials and resources provided by the American University of Paraguay for preparation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a student's desire to excel and the ethical imperative to uphold academic integrity. The pressure to perform well on entrance exams can lead to the temptation to seek unfair advantages. Navigating this requires a strong understanding of the American University of Paraguay's academic policies and a commitment to ethical conduct, ensuring that all applicants are evaluated on a level playing field. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a student independently preparing for the exam, using only officially sanctioned study materials and resources provided by the American University of Paraguay. This aligns with the university's commitment to fair assessment and academic honesty, as outlined in its entrance exam regulations. Relying solely on these approved materials ensures that the student's knowledge and abilities are assessed accurately and ethically, without any undue advantage gained through unauthorized means. This upholds the principle of meritocracy central to academic admissions. Incorrect approach is analysis. Seeking assistance from individuals who claim to have prior knowledge of the exam content is an unethical and fraudulent approach. This directly violates the American University of Paraguay's academic integrity policies, which prohibit any form of cheating or collusion. Such actions undermine the fairness of the examination process and can lead to severe penalties, including disqualification from admission. Obtaining and reviewing leaked exam questions from unofficial sources is a clear breach of academic integrity and potentially illegal. This circumvents the intended purpose of the entrance exam, which is to assess a candidate's preparedness. The American University of Paraguay's regulations explicitly forbid the use of any unauthorized materials or information related to the exam. Engaging in discussions with other applicants about specific exam questions or strategies during the exam period, even if framed as collaborative study, can be construed as collusion. This violates the principle of individual assessment and the university's rules against unauthorized collaboration, as it could lead to an unfair advantage for those involved. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing similar situations should first consult the official regulations and ethical guidelines of the institution. In this case, the American University of Paraguay's entrance exam guidelines are paramount. The decision-making process should prioritize adherence to these rules, focusing on fair play and personal integrity. If there is any ambiguity, seeking clarification from the admissions office is a responsible step. The core principle is to ensure that any action taken is transparent, ethical, and in full compliance with established academic standards. Question 5. Which approach would be most appropriate for developing a question for the American University of Paraguay's entrance exam, ensuring compliance with Paraguayan educational regulations and university admission guidelines? Option A. Creating a question that focuses on current global trends in a discipline, without ensuring its relevance to the foundational knowledge expected for entry into a Paraguayan university program. Option B. Designing a question that is intentionally ambiguous to encourage critical thinking and interpretation, without explicit reference to Paraguayan educational standards. Option C. Developing a question that tests advanced theoretical concepts in a broad academic field, irrespective of specific Paraguayan curriculum standards or the university's program requirements. Option D. Crafting a question that assesses a candidate's understanding of a core subject area directly relevant to their intended field of study at the American University of Paraguay, in alignment with the Paraguayan Ministry of Education and Culture's framework for higher education admissions. The correct answer is C. Developing a question that tests advanced theoretical concepts in a broad academic field, irrespective of specific Paraguayan curriculum standards or the university's program requirements. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the university entrance exam for the American University of Paraguay must adhere strictly to Paraguayan educational regulations and the specific guidelines established by the university for its admissions process. Misinterpreting or failing to apply these regulations can lead to invalid exam questions, unfair assessment of candidates, and potential legal or administrative challenges to the exam's integrity. Careful judgment is required to ensure all aspects of the exam align with the established Paraguayan framework. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the Paraguayan Ministry of Education and Culture (MEC) regulations concerning university entrance examinations and the American University of Paraguay's internal admissions policies. This approach ensures that the question directly assesses knowledge or skills relevant to the intended field of study, as mandated by Paraguayan educational standards, and that the question's format and content are appropriate for an entrance exam. Specifically, it aligns with the principle of fair and equitable assessment, a cornerstone of educational policy in Paraguay, by ensuring questions are relevant and unbiased. An approach that focuses solely on general academic rigor without considering Paraguayan-specific educational objectives would be incorrect. This fails to meet the regulatory requirement of aligning the exam with the national curriculum and standards set by the MEC. Another incorrect approach would be to prioritize novelty or complexity over clarity and relevance to the core competencies expected of incoming students, potentially violating the principle of a fair and transparent assessment process. Finally, an approach that overlooks the American University of Paraguay's specific programmatic requirements for different faculties would also be flawed, as it would not adequately prepare candidates for their chosen fields of study, according to the university's own established criteria. Professionals tasked with developing entrance exam questions should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a comprehensive understanding of the governing regulatory bodies, MEC, and the institution's specific academic and admissions policies. This is followed by a needs assessment to identify the essential knowledge and skills for the program. Questions should then be drafted, reviewed for clarity, relevance, and adherence to all regulatory and institutional guidelines, and finally, piloted or reviewed by subject matter experts and educational assessment specialists to ensure validity and fairness. Question 6. Implementation of a revised assessment methodology for the American University of Paraguay entrance exam requires careful consideration of its potential effects. Which approach best ensures adherence to the exam's regulatory framework, laws, and guidelines while maintaining academic integrity? Option A. Proceeding with the revised methodology based on the assumption that any changes will be acceptable as long as they are administratively efficient and perceived as modern. Option B. Adopting assessment practices commonly used by international universities without a specific review of their applicability to the Paraguayan context or the American University of Paraguay's unique regulatory requirements. Option C. Conducting a comprehensive impact assessment that analyzes the proposed changes against the specific regulatory framework, laws, and guidelines of the American University of Paraguay entrance exam, considering effects on validity, reliability, fairness, and compliance with Paraguayan educational regulations. Option D. Relying on informal feedback from a small group of faculty members to gauge the potential impact of the revised methodology, without a formal, documented analysis of regulatory compliance. The correct answer is C. Conducting a comprehensive impact assessment that analyzes the proposed changes against the specific regulatory framework, laws, and guidelines of the American University of Paraguay entrance exam, considering effects on validity, reliability, fairness, and compliance with Paraguayan educational regulations. Explanation. The scenario presents a challenge in balancing the university's commitment to academic integrity with the practicalities of managing student admissions under potentially evolving regulatory landscapes. The core professional challenge lies in interpreting and applying the American University of Paraguay's entrance exam regulations in a way that is both fair to applicants and compliant with the spirit and letter of the law. This requires a nuanced understanding of the exam's purpose and the potential impact of any changes on the applicant pool and the university's reputation. The correct approach involves a thorough impact assessment that considers the regulatory framework, laws, and guidelines specific to the American University of Paraguay's entrance exam. This assessment must proactively identify potential consequences of any proposed changes on the exam's validity, reliability, and fairness, as well as its alignment with the university's admission standards and the Paraguayan educational regulatory environment. This ensures that any adjustments are made with a clear understanding of their implications and are designed to uphold academic standards and legal compliance, thereby safeguarding the integrity of the admissions process. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on administrative convenience without considering the regulatory framework would fail to uphold the university's obligations. This could lead to the implementation of changes that inadvertently violate existing regulations or undermine the fairness of the entrance exam, potentially resulting in legal challenges or reputational damage. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes external benchmarks without rigorous internal assessment risks misapplying standards or overlooking specific Paraguayan regulatory nuances. This could result in an entrance exam that is not appropriately tailored to the university's context or the local educational system, compromising its effectiveness and compliance. A third incorrect approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or informal feedback without a structured, data-driven impact assessment is inherently flawed. This method lacks the rigor required to ensure regulatory compliance and can lead to decisions based on incomplete or biased information, jeopardizing the fairness and validity of the entrance exam. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the governing regulatory framework. This involves identifying all relevant laws, university policies, and examination guidelines. Subsequently, a systematic impact assessment should be conducted, evaluating potential changes against these established criteria. This assessment should involve consultation with relevant stakeholders, including academic staff and legal counsel, to ensure all perspectives and potential consequences are considered. Finally, decisions should be based on a comprehensive analysis of the assessment findings, prioritizing regulatory compliance, academic integrity, and fairness to applicants. Question 7. Market research demonstrates that a significant number of applicants for the American University of Paraguay's entrance exam seek to gain an advantage through various means. You are an applicant preparing for the exam and have heard that a friend, who has already completed the exam, is willing to share details about the question formats and topics covered. According to the American University of Paraguay's entrance exam guidelines, what is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Discuss the exam with other applicants to collaboratively prepare and share insights. Option B. Seek out online forums that claim to have insider information about the exam to gain an edge. Option C. Politely decline your friend's offer and continue your independent preparation based solely on the official study materials provided by the university. Option D. Accept your friend's offer to discuss question types and topics to better understand the exam structure. The correct answer is C. Politely decline your friend's offer and continue your independent preparation based solely on the official study materials provided by the university. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to balance the pursuit of academic advancement with the ethical imperative of adhering to the American University of Paraguay's entrance exam regulations. The temptation to leverage external information, even if seemingly minor, can compromise the integrity of the examination process and the fairness of admissions. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between legitimate preparation and prohibited actions. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves strictly adhering to the stated examination rules and guidelines provided by the American University of Paraguay. This means refraining from any form of unauthorized assistance or information gathering that could influence performance on the exam. This approach is ethically sound and aligns with the university's commitment to academic integrity and fair assessment, as mandated by its internal regulations for entrance examinations. Incorrect approach is analysis. Seeking clarification from a friend who has already taken the exam about specific question types or difficulty levels constitutes a breach of examination integrity. This is because it bypasses the intended independent assessment and introduces an unfair advantage, violating the spirit and letter of the university's rules against seeking external aid. Discussing the exam content with a peer who is also preparing for the exam, even if framed as a study session, risks sharing information that could be considered pre-exam knowledge. This can lead to an uneven playing field and undermines the principle of equal opportunity for all candidates, as implicitly required by the university's examination framework. Reviewing online forums or unofficial study groups that claim to have insider information about the exam questions is a direct violation of the university's regulations. Such actions exploit potential leaks or rumors, compromising the validity of the assessment and the fairness of the admissions process. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing similar situations should always prioritize adherence to the explicit rules and ethical guidelines of the institution or organization. This involves a proactive understanding of all applicable regulations before engaging in any activity related to the examination. When in doubt, seeking clarification directly from the examination authority is the most responsible course of action. The decision-making process should be guided by a commitment to fairness, integrity, and the upholding of established protocols. Question 8. During the evaluation of a proposed infrastructure project in Paraguay, which approach to assessing its potential consequences best aligns with the principles of responsible development and the expectations for applicants to the American University of Paraguay's entrance exam, focusing on a qualitative understanding of impact. Option A. A systematic assessment that considers direct and indirect environmental, social, and economic impacts, incorporating stakeholder perspectives and adhering to Paraguayan environmental regulations. Option B, an assessment that prioritizes the project's immediate economic benefits and potential for job creation, with minimal consideration for long-term environmental effects. Option C, a rapid review focused on identifying only the most obvious and easily quantifiable negative impacts to expedite the decision-making process. Option D, an assessment based on the opinions of local community leaders and the applicant's personal judgment regarding the project's overall desirability. The correct answer is A systematic assessment that considers direct and indirect environmental, social, and economic impacts, incorporating stakeholder perspectives and adhering to Paraguayan environmental regulations. Explanation: the scenario presents a challenge for an applicant to the American University of Paraguay's entrance exam because it requires them to understand the foundational principles of impact assessment within a Paraguayan regulatory context, without resorting to mathematical calculations. The difficulty lies in discerning the most appropriate and ethically sound approach to evaluating the potential consequences of a proposed project, considering the specific legal and environmental frameworks applicable in Paraguay. The correct approach involves a comprehensive and systematic assessment that considers both direct and indirect impacts, engages relevant stakeholders, and adheres to Paraguayan environmental legislation and university admission guidelines. This approach is correct because it aligns with the principles of responsible project development and academic integrity. Specifically, Paraguayan environmental law, such as Law No. 294/93 on environmental impact assessment, mandates a thorough evaluation of potential environmental, social, and economic effects. Furthermore, the American University of Paraguay, as an institution committed to academic rigor and ethical conduct, would expect applicants to demonstrate an understanding of these principles. This approach prioritizes a holistic view, ensuring that all facets of a project's influence are considered, which is crucial for informed decision-making and sustainable development. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate economic benefits without considering broader environmental or social consequences fails to meet the requirements of Paraguayan environmental law. Such a narrow focus ignores the mandate for a comprehensive impact assessment and could lead to significant environmental degradation or social disruption, violating ethical principles of responsibility. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes speed and cost efficiency over thoroughness by conducting a superficial review would also be professionally unacceptable. This neglects the due diligence required by law and ethical standards. A superficial review risks overlooking critical negative impacts, thereby undermining the purpose of an impact assessment and potentially leading to future remediation costs and reputational damage. It demonstrates a lack of commitment to responsible evaluation and academic integrity. Finally, an approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or personal opinions rather than objective data and established methodologies would be flawed. This lacks the scientific rigor and evidence-based reasoning expected in impact assessments and academic evaluations. It fails to comply with the systematic and objective requirements inherent in both legal frameworks and university admission standards. The professional decision-making process for similar situations involves 1. Identifying the core objective of the assessment, in this case, evaluating a project's impact for university admission. 2. Recognizing the relevant legal and ethical frameworks, Paraguayan environmental law and university admission criteria. 3. Prioritizing a comprehensive, systematic, and objective methodology. 4. Considering all potential impacts, environmental, social, economic. 5. Engaging with relevant information sources and stakeholders where applicable. 6. Making a judgment based on evidence and adherence to established principles, rather than expediency or personal bias. Question 9. Stakeholder feedback indicates that the current admissions process at the American University of Paraguay may inadvertently disadvantage applicants from certain socioeconomic backgrounds, potentially limiting diversity. The admissions committee is considering adjustments to the evaluation criteria to address these concerns. Which of the following approaches best aligns with the regulatory framework and ethical considerations for university admissions in Paraguay? Option A. Implement a series of informal interviews with a select group of applicants from disadvantaged background to gauge their experiences and make ad hoc adjustments to the admissions process based on these conversations. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment of proposed changes to admissions criteria, ensuring full compliance with American University of Paraguay's policies and Paraguayan educational laws, and documenting all findings and decisions. Option C. Prioritize applicants who express strong interest in diversity initiatives during their application essays, regardless of other academic or extracurricular qualifications, to quickly increase the representation of diverse students. Option D. Immediately revise the admissions rubric to include a specific quota for applicants from identified socioeconomic groups based on the feedback received to ensure immediate diversification. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment of proposed changes to admissions criteria, ensuring full compliance with American University of Paraguay's policies and Paraguayan educational laws, and documenting all findings and decisions. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between the university's desire to attract a diverse student body and the need to maintain academic integrity and fairness in the admissions process. The admissions committee must navigate the expectations of various stakeholders, including prospective students, current students, faculty, and the university administration, while adhering strictly to the established admissions policies and Paraguayan educational regulations. The core difficulty lies in balancing inclusivity with meritocracy and ensuring that any adjustments to the admissions process are transparent, equitable, and legally sound. The correct approach involves a thorough impact assessment that prioritizes adherence to the American University of Paraguay's established admissions policies and relevant Paraguayan educational laws. This approach is correct because it grounds decision-making in existing regulatory frameworks and institutional guidelines, ensuring fairness and preventing arbitrary changes. Paraguayan educational law, as interpreted by the Ministry of Education and Sciences, mandates transparent and non-discriminatory admissions processes. By conducting a formal impact assessment, the university demonstrates due diligence in understanding how any proposed changes might affect different applicant groups and the overall integrity of the admissions system, aligning with principles of good governance and regulatory compliance. An incorrect approach would be to immediately implement changes based on anecdotal feedback, without a structured assessment. This fails to consider the potential for unintended consequences, such as creating new forms of bias or violating existing regulations. It also bypasses the necessary procedural steps required by Paraguayan educational authorities for significant policy modifications, potentially leading to legal challenges or sanctions. Another incorrect approach is to prioritize stakeholder satisfaction over regulatory compliance. While feedback is valuable, it cannot supersede legal and ethical obligations. Implementing changes solely to appease a vocal group, without a rigorous assessment of their impact on fairness and adherence to Paraguayan educational standards, would be a significant ethical and regulatory failure. This could lead to accusations of favoritism or discrimination, undermining the university's reputation and its standing with regulatory bodies. Finally, an approach that focuses on superficial adjustments without addressing the root causes of any perceived inequities would also be incorrect. This might involve minor tweaks to application forms or interview questions that do not fundamentally alter the selection criteria or ensure equitable evaluation. Such an approach would fail to achieve meaningful improvement and could be seen as a disingenuous attempt to address concerns, ultimately leading to continued dissatisfaction and potential regulatory scrutiny. The professional decision-making process in such situations should involve 1. Clearly defining the problem and the specific stakeholder feedback received. 2. Reviewing existing university admissions policies and relevant Paraguayan educational laws and regulations. 3. Initiating a formal impact assessment process to analyze potential consequences of any proposed changes. 4. Consulting with legal counsel and relevant university committees to ensure compliance. 5. Developing and implementing changes in a transparent and documented manner, with clear communication to all stakeholders. Question 10. Performance analysis shows that a candidate for the American University of Paraguay entrance exam encounters a question that requires knowledge of a specific historical event in Paraguay. The candidate is unsure of the exact details and feels pressured by the time limit to provide a complete answer. Which of the following actions best aligns with the regulatory framework and guidelines for this entrance exam? Option A. Immediately search online for the answer to the specific historical event. Option B. Refer to a pre-approved study guide that was permitted for use during the exam. Option C. Ask a fellow candidate for assistance with the question. Option D. Attempt to recall the information to the best of their ability and proceed, acknowledging any uncertainty in their answer if the format allows. The correct answer is D. Attempt to recall the information to the best of their ability and proceed, acknowledging any uncertainty in their answer if the format allows. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an individual to balance the immediate need for information with the ethical and regulatory obligations to protect sensitive data. The pressure to provide a quick response, especially in an academic or professional setting, can lead to shortcuts that violate established protocols. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all actions taken are compliant with the American University of Paraguay's entrance exam guidelines and any relevant Paraguayan educational regulations concerning data privacy and academic integrity. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the exam's specific instructions and the university's official policies regarding the use of external resources during the assessment. This approach is ethically sound and regulatorily compliant because it prioritizes adherence to the established rules of the examination. By consulting the official documentation, the individual demonstrates respect for the integrity of the assessment process and avoids any potential breaches of academic misconduct or data privacy regulations that might be implicitly or explicitly stated in the exam's framework. This proactive step ensures that any information sought or used is done so within the permissible boundaries set by the American University of Paraguay. An incorrect approach that involves directly searching for answers to specific exam questions online or through unauthorized channels represents a failure in academic integrity. This action directly contravenes the spirit and likely the letter of any entrance exam's rules, which are designed to assess an individual's own knowledge and abilities. Furthermore, if the exam involves any personal data or proprietary information, such an action could also lead to a breach of data privacy regulations, even if not explicitly detailed in the exam's immediate instructions, by exposing or misusing sensitive information. Another incorrect approach, such as asking a peer or mentor for direct answers during the exam, also constitutes academic dishonesty. This bypasses the intended assessment of individual capability and undermines the fairness of the examination for all candidates. It violates the principle of independent work, which is fundamental to academic and professional evaluation. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear understanding of the assessment's objectives and rules. Before commencing any task that might involve seeking external information, professionals should always 1. Consult the official guidelines and policies provided for the assessment. 2. Identify any restrictions on the use of external resources or collaboration. 3. If in doubt, seek clarification from the exam administrators or relevant university authorities rather than making assumptions. 4. Prioritize adherence to ethical principles of honesty and integrity above the desire for a quick or easy solution. Question 11. Quality control measures reveal a significant anomaly in the scoring algorithm used for a critical section of the American University of Paraguay's entrance exam, potentially affecting the accuracy of results for a substantial cohort of applicants. What is the most appropriate immediate course of action to uphold the integrity of the admissions process? Option A. Adjust the scoring algorithm retroactively for all affected applicants based on an estimated correction factor without a full audit of the original anomaly. Option B. Proceed with releasing the exam results as calculated, but inform applicants that a potential scoring discrepancy may have occurred and offer a review upon request. Option C. Immediately halt the use of the affected scoring algorithm, initiate a comprehensive review of its functionality, and suspend the release of results dependent on that section until a verified solution is implemented. Option D. Continue using the current scoring algorithm, while a separate, less urgent review is conducted in parallel with the ongoing admissions cycle. The correct answer is C. Immediately halt the use of the affected scoring algorithm, initiate a comprehensive review of its functionality, and suspend the release of results dependent on that section until a verified solution is implemented. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the university's commitment to academic integrity, as outlined in its foundational principles and entrance exam regulations, is directly at odds with the potential for a systemic error in the assessment process. The pressure to admit qualified students while upholding rigorous standards necessitates a careful and ethical response. The core of the challenge lies in balancing the need for accurate evaluation with the potential impact on applicants and the university's reputation. The correct approach involves a thorough and transparent investigation into the identified quality control issue. This entails immediately halting the use of the compromised assessment component, conducting a detailed root cause analysis, and developing a remediation plan. This approach aligns with the American University of Paraguay's stated commitment to fair and equitable admissions, as well as general principles of educational assessment that demand validity and reliability. Ethically, it upholds the principle of justice by ensuring all applicants are evaluated on a level playing field and prevents the admission of students based on flawed data. It also demonstrates accountability and a commitment to continuous improvement in the admissions process. An incorrect approach would be to ignore or downplay the quality control findings. This failure to act would violate the university's own regulatory framework for entrance exams, which implicitly requires assessments to be valid and reliable. Ethically, it would be unjust to applicants who may have been disadvantaged or advantaged by the flaw, and it would undermine the integrity of the entire admissions process. Another incorrect approach would be to proceed with admissions using the flawed assessment component, while attempting to correct scores post hoc without a clear, transparent, and validated methodology. This would still be based on an unreliable foundation and would likely lead to further inequities and a loss of trust. It fails to address the root cause and risks creating a perception of arbitrary decision-making. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes integrity, fairness, and adherence to established regulations. This involves 1. Acknowledging and documenting the issue promptly. 2. Consulting relevant university policies and the specific entrance exam regulations. 3. Engaging relevant stakeholders, e.g., admissions committee, academic affairs, to assess the scope and impact. 4. Developing and implementing a plan to address the issue, which may include suspending the assessment, investigating, and communicating transparently. 5. Evaluating the effectiveness of the remediation and ensuring future assessments are robust. Question 12. The assessment process reveals that a candidate for the American University of Paraguay's entrance exam has a prior academic record with some inconsistencies. The university's entrance exam regulations stipulate a specific methodology for assessing the impact of previous academic performance on an applicant's suitability. Which approach best aligns with the regulatory framework for this assessment? Option A. Accepting the candidate's self-reported explanations for any academic anomalies without independent verification, prioritizing their narrative over the university's established assessment criteria. Option B. A comprehensive review of the candidate's academic transcripts and records, directly applying the criteria for evaluating prior academic performance as detailed in the American University of Paraguay's entrance exam regulations. Option C. Immediately disqualifying the candidate if their prior academic performance falls below a predetermined arbitrary score, without considering the specific guidelines or potential contextual factors outlined in the university's regulations. Option D. Giving significant weight to informal feedback from previous educational institutions or personal acquaintances, even if this information is not formally documented or directly related to the university's specific assessment parameters. The correct answer is B. A comprehensive review of the candidate's academic transcripts and records, directly applying the criteria for evaluating prior academic performance as detailed in the American University of Paraguay's entrance exam regulations. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge in interpreting and applying the American University of Paraguay's entrance exam regulations, specifically concerning the impact assessment of a candidate's prior academic performance. The difficulty lies in balancing the stated objectives of the assessment with the need for fair and consistent evaluation, ensuring that no candidate is unfairly disadvantaged or advantaged due to factors outside their control or due to a misinterpretation of the university's guidelines. The university's commitment to academic integrity and equal opportunity necessitates a rigorous and ethically sound approach to impact assessment. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the candidate's academic records, cross-referencing them with the specific criteria outlined in the American University of Paraguay's entrance exam regulations for evaluating prior academic performance. This approach is correct because it directly adheres to the established regulatory framework of the university. It prioritizes a systematic and objective evaluation based on the defined parameters, ensuring that the assessment is consistent with the university's stated goals for admitting students who meet its academic standards. This method upholds fairness and transparency by applying the same evaluation standards to all candidates. Incorrect approach is analysis, an approach that focuses solely on the candidate's stated reasons for any academic discrepancies without independently verifying them against the university's regulations, is incorrect. This fails to adhere to the university's established assessment criteria and introduces subjectivity, potentially leading to biased evaluations. It bypasses the required regulatory process of objective review, an approach that prioritizes anecdotal evidence or personal recommendations over the documented academic history, and the university's specific assessment guidelines is also incorrect. This deviates from the regulatory framework, which mandates an evidence-based evaluation of prior academic performance. Relying on informal information undermines the integrity and fairness of the entrance examination process, an approach that dismisses any academic performance below a certain threshold without considering the specific context or the university's guidelines for evaluating such situations is incorrect. This demonstrates a lack of adherence to the nuanced requirements of the university's regulations, which likely allow for consideration of extenuating circumstances or specific academic pathways as defined within their framework. It represents an arbitrary application of standards rather than a regulatory compliant assessment. Professional reasoning. Professionals tasked with evaluating entrance exam applications must first familiarize themselves thoroughly with the specific regulatory framework of the institution. When faced with a scenario involving impact assessment, the decision-making process should involve 1. Identifying the relevant sections of the university's entrance exam regulations pertaining to the evaluation of prior academic performance. 2. Systematically gathering and reviewing all available academic documentation for the candidate. 3. Applying the defined criteria from the regulations objectively to the gathered evidence. 4. Documenting the assessment process and the rationale for any conclusions drawn, ensuring transparency and accountability. This structured approach ensures compliance with regulations and promotes fair and equitable treatment of all applicants. Question 13. Risk assessment procedures indicate a potential discrepancy in an applicant's submitted academic transcript, suggesting possible plagiarism from a previous institution. The admissions committee must decide how to proceed with this application. Option A. Initiate a formal investigation into the alleged plagiarism, requesting documentation from the applicant and the previous institution, and providing the applicant with an opportunity to respond before making a final admissions decision. Option B. Rely on informal communication with faculty at the previous institution to confirm the plagiarism allegation before deciding on the application. Option C. Admit the applicant without further investigation, assuming the allegation is unsubstantiated and the applicant is otherwise qualified. Option D. Immediately reject the application based on the suspicion of plagiarism to uphold academic integrity standards. The correct answer is A. Initiate a formal investigation into the alleged plagiarism, requesting documentation from the applicant and the previous institution, and providing the applicant with an opportunity to respond before making a final admissions decision. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge in balancing the university's commitment to academic integrity with the practicalities of managing student applications. The admissions committee must assess the risk of academic misconduct without unfairly penalizing applicants based on incomplete or potentially misinterpreted information. The professional challenge lies in applying the university's stated policies rigorously yet fairly, ensuring that decisions are evidence-based and adhere to due process principles. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough, evidence-based review of the applicant's academic record, seeking clarification directly from the applicant and relevant institutions before making a final decision. This aligns with the principles of fairness and due process, which are fundamental to academic institutions. Specifically, it respects the presumption of innocence until proven otherwise and ensures that decisions are not based on speculation or hearsay. The university's internal guidelines on academic integrity and admissions would likely mandate such a process, requiring concrete evidence of misconduct before any adverse action is taken. This approach prioritizes accuracy and fairness, upholding the university's reputation for academic rigor and ethical conduct. Incorrect approach is analysis. An approach that immediately rejects the application based solely on the unsubstantiated allegation of plagiarism is procedurally unfair and ethically unsound. It bypasses the necessary steps of investigation and verification, potentially leading to an unjust outcome for the applicant. This fails to adhere to the university's likely internal policies that require a formal investigation and opportunity for the applicant to respond to allegations. Another incorrect approach would be to admit the student without further inquiry, assuming the allegation is unfounded. This neglects the university's responsibility to maintain academic standards and could expose the institution to reputational damage if the allegation were, in fact, true. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to adequately assess risk. Finally, an approach that relies on informal discussions or hearsay from external sources without documented evidence or direct communication with the applicant or the previous institution is unprofessional and lacks the rigor required for admissions decisions. This approach is susceptible to bias and misinformation, undermining the integrity of the admissions process. Professional reasoning. Professionals in admissions and academic integrity roles should always follow a structured, evidence-based decision-making process. This involves clearly defining the issue, gathering all relevant facts and documentation, consulting applicable policies and regulations, seeking clarification from all parties involved, and documenting every step of the process. When faced with allegations, the default should be to investigate thoroughly and fairly, providing the individual with an opportunity to be heard before making any definitive judgments or taking disciplinary action. Question 14. The assessment process reveals an applicant to the American University of Paraguay who demonstrates exceptional extracurricular achievements and strong personal references, but whose academic transcripts indicate a performance that falls slightly below the stated minimum GPA requirement for direct admission. Which approach best aligns with the regulatory framework and ethical guidelines for university admissions? Option A. Expedite the review process by overlooking the slight GPA shortfall, focusing instead on the positive aspects of the application to ensure the university meets its enrollment targets. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive review of the applicant's entire profile, weighing their demonstrated leadership and potential against the stated academic criteria, and if the committee deems their overall merit exceptional and the academic shortfall minor, recommend a conditional admission based on specific academic support measures. Option C. Reject the applicant outright due to the failure to meet the minimum GPA requirement, as this is a non-negotiable criterion according to the university's published admissions policy. Option D. Prioritize the strong personal references and extracurricular achievements, assuming these indicate a higher potential for success than the GPA suggests, and proceed with admission. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive review of the applicant's entire profile, weighing their demonstrated leadership and potential against the stated academic criteria, and if the committee deems their overall merit exceptional and the academic shortfall minor, recommend a conditional admission based on specific academic support measures. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the admissions committee to balance the university's commitment to academic excellence with its ethical obligation to ensure a fair and transparent admissions process. Misinterpreting or misapplying the established admissions criteria can lead to accusations of bias, unfairness, and a potential breach of the American University of Paraguay's internal regulations and any overarching educational accreditation standards. The pressure to admit a diverse and capable student body must be managed within the defined procedural boundaries. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the applicant's submitted documentation against the explicitly stated academic and non-academic criteria outlined in the American University of Paraguay's official admissions guidelines. This approach is right because it adheres strictly to the established regulatory framework for admissions, ensuring objectivity and consistency. By focusing on the documented evidence and the predefined criteria, the committee upholds the principles of fairness and transparency, which are fundamental to maintaining the integrity of the university selection process and complying with its own internal policies. Incorrect approaches analysis, an approach that prioritizes anecdotal evidence or personal recommendations over documented qualifications, fails to adhere to the established admissions criteria. This is an ethical failure, as it introduces subjective bias and deviates from the transparent process designed to evaluate all applicants equally based on merit. It also risks violating internal university regulations that mandate objective assessment, an approach that focuses solely on the applicant's perceived potential for future success, without a rigorous evaluation of their current academic standing and demonstrated abilities, as per the university's guidelines, is also problematic. This can lead to admitting students who may not meet the foundational requirements for academic success, potentially undermining the university's academic standards, and failing to comply with the spirit of the admissions regulations, which are designed to identify academically prepared individuals. An approach that seeks to expedite the review process by overlooking certain documentation requirements or applying less stringent scrutiny to specific applicants, even with the intention of increasing enrollment numbers, constitutes a procedural and ethical failure. This undermines the integrity of the admissions process, creates an uneven playing field for applicants, and violates the university's commitment to a thorough and fair evaluation as stipulated in its internal guidelines. Professional reasoning. Professionals in university admissions must always operate within the defined regulatory and ethical boundaries. When faced with complex applicant profiles or pressures, the decision-making process should involve 1. Clearly identifying and understanding all relevant internal university policies and external accreditation standards governing admissions. 2. Systematically evaluating each applicant against these established criteria using objective evidence. 3. Documenting the rationale for all decisions, particularly for borderline cases. 4. Seeking consensus among the admissions committee members to ensure a balanced and fair judgment. 5. Escalating complex or ambiguous cases to a higher authority or a designated review board if internal policies permit. The paramount principle is to uphold the integrity and fairness of the admissions process. Question 15. The assessment process reveals a proposal to significantly alter the core curriculum for incoming students at the American University of Paraguay. To evaluate the potential consequences of this change, which approach to impact assessment would be most appropriate and compliant with the American University of Paraguay entrance exams regulatory framework? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment that analyzes potential effects on student learning outcomes, faculty workload, and institutional resources, strictly adhering to the principles and guidelines outlined in the American University of Paraguay entrance exams regulatory framework. Option B. Implement an impact assessment based on the latest international standards for higher education accreditation, assuming these will provide the most robust evaluation of the proposed curriculum alteration. Option C. Focus the impact assessment on gathering informal opinions from a small group of current students and recent alumni to gauge their general sentiment towards curriculum changes. Option D. Prioritize the adoption of impact assessment methodologies commonly used by European universities, as these are often considered leading practices in curriculum development and evaluation. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment that analyzes potential effects on student learning outcomes, faculty workload, and institutional resources, strictly adhering to the principles and guidelines outlined in the American University of Paraguay entrance exams regulatory framework. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge in interpreting and applying the American University of Paraguay's entrance exam regulations, specifically concerning the impact assessment of a proposed curriculum change. The difficulty lies in balancing the need for comprehensive evaluation with the practical constraints of time and resources, while ensuring adherence to the university's established guidelines. The core professional challenge is to determine the most appropriate method for assessing the impact of a significant curriculum alteration, without overstepping the bounds of the exam's regulatory framework or introducing external, irrelevant standards. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a focused impact assessment that directly addresses the curriculum, changes potential effects on student learning outcomes, faculty resources, and existing infrastructure, all within the scope defined by the American University of Paraguay's entrance exam regulations. This approach is justified because it prioritizes the specific requirements and context of the university's entrance exam, ensuring that the assessment is relevant, proportionate, and compliant with the established guidelines. It demonstrates a commitment to understanding how the proposed change aligns with the university's academic mission and operational capacity, as evaluated through the lens of the entrance exam's objectives. Correct approaches analysis. An approach that solely focuses on external accreditation standards from other countries or international bodies is incorrect because it violates the strict jurisdictional requirement of the American University of Paraguay entrance exam. The exam's regulations are paramount, and introducing external frameworks without explicit authorization or relevance to the Paraguayan context is a regulatory failure. This approach demonstrates a lack of understanding of the exam's specific jurisdiction and its governing principles. An approach that prioritizes a broad, theoretical impact assessment without any specific connection to the American University of Paraguay's entrance exam regulations is also incorrect. While theoretical understanding is valuable, the exam's framework mandates a specific application. Failing to anchor the assessment within these regulations leads to an irrelevant and non-compliant evaluation, ignoring the core purpose of the exam's assessment process. An approach that relies on anecdotal evidence or informal feedback from a limited group of stakeholders, without a structured methodology aligned with the university's entrance exam guidelines, is professionally unsound. This method lacks the rigor and systematic evaluation required by formal assessment processes and fails to adhere to the structured approach implied by the exam's regulatory framework. It is ethically questionable as it may lead to biased or incomplete conclusions. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a scenario should first meticulously review the specific regulatory framework, laws, and guidelines for the American University of Paraguay entrance exam. They must identify the precise scope and objectives of the assessment process as defined by these documents. The next step is to determine how the proposed curriculum change directly relates to these objectives and constraints. The chosen impact assessment method must be demonstrably aligned with the exam's jurisdiction and requirements, prioritizing relevance and compliance over generic or external standards. A structured, evidence-based approach that directly addresses the potential impacts on key university functions, as understood within the Paraguayan context and the exam's framework, is essential for professional decision-making. Question 16. Investigation of an applicant's entrance exam results for the American University of Paraguay reveals a statistically improbable improvement in performance compared to their previous academic records, raising concerns about potential academic misconduct. Which of the following represents the most appropriate course of action for the admissions committee, strictly adhering to the regulatory framework governing university entrance exams in Paraguay? Option A. Immediately disqualify the applicant based on the statistical anomaly, without further investigation, to maintain the integrity of the admissions process. Option B. Initiate a formal review process to investigate the discrepancy, which may involve requesting further documentation from the applicant or re-evaluating their application in light of the exam results, in accordance with university policy and Paraguayan educational regulations. Option C. Proceed with admitting the applicant, assuming the improvement is a result of dedicated study and the applicant's potential to meet enrollment targets. Option D. Consult with the applicant's previous educational institutions for informal feedback on their academic integrity before making a decision. The correct answer is C. Proceed with admitting the applicant, assuming the improvement is a result of dedicated study and the applicant's potential to meet enrollment targets. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent conflict between a student's desire for academic success and the university's commitment to academic integrity. The pressure to perform well on entrance exams, especially for a prestigious institution like American University of Paraguay, can lead some individuals to consider unethical shortcuts. Careful judgment is required to uphold the principles of fairness and meritocracy that underpin the admissions process. The correct approach involves a thorough and unbiased evaluation of all submitted application materials, including the entrance exam, against established academic criteria and university policies. This approach upholds the integrity of the admissions process by ensuring that all candidates are assessed on their own merits and that the university admits students who meet its academic standards. Specifically, adhering to the American University of Paraguay's stated admission guidelines and the Paraguayan Ministry of Education and Culture's regulations on higher education entrance examinations is paramount. These regulations likely emphasize fair assessment and prohibit any form of academic dishonesty. The ethical imperative is to maintain a level playing field for all applicants and to ensure that the university's reputation for academic excellence is preserved. An incorrect approach would be to overlook potential irregularities in an applicant's exam performance due to external pressure or a desire to meet enrollment targets. This failure to rigorously investigate suspicious patterns, such as unusually high scores that deviate significantly from a candidate's prior academic record or common performance benchmarks, violates the principle of fair assessment. It also contravenes the spirit and likely the letter of Paraguayan educational regulations that mandate impartial evaluation. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss concerns about academic integrity without proper due diligence, perhaps due to a perceived administrative burden. This demonstrates a lack of commitment to upholding ethical standards and risks admitting unqualified students, thereby undermining the academic quality of the institution. Professionals in admissions should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes adherence to established policies and ethical principles. This involves 1. Recognizing potential red flags or anomalies in application data. 2. Initiating a systematic and objective investigation process, following university protocols. 3. Consulting relevant internal policies and external regulatory guidelines, e.g., those from the Paraguayan Ministry of Education and Culture. 4. Making decisions based on evidence and established criteria, ensuring fairness and transparency. 5. Documenting all steps taken and decisions made. Question 17. The efficiency study reveals that the current American University of Paraguay entrance exam administration incurs significant logistical costs. A proposal has been put forth to streamline the process by reducing the number of proctors and shortening the examination time, with the stated aim of cutting operational expenses. Which of the following approaches best addresses this situation while upholding the principles of fair assessment and academic integrity? Option A. Immediately implement the proposed changes to reduce proctor numbers and examination time to achieve immediate cost savings, assuming that efficiency gains will inherently maintain assessment standards. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment to evaluate how reducing proctors and examination time might affect the fairness, validity, and reliability of the entrance exam, and explore alternative cost-saving measures that do not compromise assessment quality. Option C. Implement a simplified scoring rubric that groups candidates into broader performance categories to expedite the grading process, even if it means less precise differentiation of abilities. Option D. Reduce the number of questions on the exam significantly to compensate for the shortened examination time, without a thorough analysis of whether the remaining questions adequately cover the required knowledge domains. The correct answer is B. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment to evaluate how reducing proctors and examination time might affect the fairness, validity, and reliability of the entrance exam, and explore alternative cost-saving measures that do not compromise assessment quality. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the university's operational needs with the ethical obligations of academic integrity and fair assessment, all within the specific regulatory framework of the American University of Paraguay entrance exam. The pressure to demonstrate efficiency can lead to shortcuts that compromise the validity and fairness of the entrance process. Careful judgment is required to ensure that any proposed changes do not undermine the fundamental principles of equitable access to education. The correct approach involves a thorough impact assessment that prioritizes the integrity of the entrance examination process. This means evaluating how any proposed changes to the exam format or administration might affect the fairness of assessment, the validity of the results in predicting academic success, and the overall equity of access for all prospective students. This approach aligns with the implicit ethical duty of educational institutions to maintain rigorous and fair admission standards, ensuring that the entrance exam serves its intended purpose without introducing bias or compromising the academic reputation of the university. While specific Paraguayan regulations for university entrance exams are not detailed here, the principle of fair assessment and academic integrity is universally recognized in higher education and would be a guiding ethical consideration. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on cost reduction without considering the impact on assessment validity would be professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from prioritizing financial efficiency over the core purpose of the entrance exam, which is to accurately measure the aptitude of candidates. Such an approach risks admitting students who are not adequately prepared, thereby potentially lowering academic standards and harming the university's reputation. Another incorrect approach that suggests reducing the number of questions without a corresponding adjustment in the assessment scope or time allocation would also be ethically flawed. This would lead to an incomplete or superficial evaluation of candidates' knowledge and skills, making the exam an unreliable predictor of academic success. This violates the principle of providing a comprehensive and fair assessment. A third incorrect approach that proposes using a simplified scoring mechanism that does not differentiate adequately between varying levels of candidate performance would be problematic. This would fail to identify the most promising candidates and could lead to the admission of less qualified individuals, undermining the meritocratic basis of the entrance examination. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic evaluation of proposed changes. This includes 1. Clearly defining the objectives of the proposed change. 2. Identifying all potential stakeholders and their interests. 3. Conducting a comprehensive impact assessment, considering academic, ethical, and operational dimensions. 4. Consulting relevant internal policies and any applicable external regulations or guidelines for university admissions in Paraguay. 5. Seeking expert opinions from academic staff and admissions professionals. 6. Documenting the decision-making process and the rationale behind the chosen course of action. Question 18. Compliance review shows that an applicant for the American University of Paraguay's undergraduate program has submitted academic transcripts from a previous institution that appear to have inconsistencies with their stated academic achievements. The admissions committee is aware of these discrepancies, but has not yet initiated a formal inquiry. Which of the following represents the most appropriate course of action for the admissions committee? Option A. Immediately reject the applicant's application due to the apparent inconsistencies, assuming academic dishonesty. Option B. Admit the applicant without further investigation, assuming the discrepancies are minor or a clerical error. Option C. Request the applicant to submit a new set of transcripts from a different, unverified source to resolve the discrepancies. Option D. Initiate a formal investigation into the applicant's academic record, requesting clarification from the applicant and the previous institution if necessary, and base the admission decision on the findings and university admission criteria. The correct answer is D. Initiate a formal investigation into the applicant's academic record, requesting clarification from the applicant and the previous institution if necessary, and base the admission decision on the findings and university admission criteria. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the university's commitment to academic integrity with the practicalities of managing student admissions and potential financial implications. The admissions committee must make a judgment call based on incomplete information, where a misstep could lead to either admitting an unqualified candidate or unfairly rejecting a potentially successful student. Careful consideration of the available evidence and adherence to established university policies are paramount. The correct approach involves a thorough, documented investigation into the applicant's academic record and any discrepancies, followed by a decision based on the findings and university admission criteria. This aligns with principles of fairness, due diligence, and transparency expected in academic admissions. Specifically, it upholds the university's responsibility to maintain academic standards and ensure that admitted students possess the foundational knowledge and skills necessary for success. The process should be guided by the American University of Paraguay's internal admissions policies, which are designed to provide a framework for evaluating applicants objectively and consistently. An incorrect approach would be to immediately reject the applicant based solely on the initial suspicion without further inquiry. This fails to provide the applicant with a fair opportunity to explain or clarify any discrepancies and violates the principle of natural justice. It also bypasses the university's established procedures for handling such situations, potentially leading to arbitrary decision-making. Another incorrect approach would be to admit the applicant without addressing the identified discrepancies, assuming the applicant is truthful or that the discrepancies are minor. This undermines academic integrity by potentially overlooking significant issues that could impact the student's future academic performance and the reputation of the university. It also fails to uphold the university's duty to ensure that all admitted students meet the required academic standards. A further incorrect approach would be to request additional documentation that is not standard for the admissions process or that could be perceived as intrusive or discriminatory. This could lead to legal or ethical challenges and would not necessarily resolve the core issue of the academic record discrepancy in a fair and objective manner. The professional reasoning process for such situations should involve 1. Identifying the discrepancy and its potential implications. 2. Consulting relevant university policies and procedures for admissions and handling discrepancies. 3. Gathering all available evidence in a systematic and documented manner. 4. Providing the applicant with an opportunity to respond to any identified issues. 5. Making a decision based on the totality of the evidence and established criteria, ensuring the decision is fair, consistent, and defensible. 6. Documenting the entire process and the final decision. Question 19. When evaluating applications for the American University of Paraguay entrance exam, which approach best ensures a fair and comprehensive assessment of each candidate's potential for academic success and alignment with the university's mission? Option A. A holistic review considering academic achievements, extracurricular involvement, personal essays, and demonstrated critical thinking skills, assessed against the university's stated admissions criteria. Option B. Prioritizing applicants based solely on their high school grade point average and scores on standardized entrance examinations. Option C. Relying primarily on the subjective impressions of admissions committee members and informal feedback from faculty members. Option D. Giving preferential treatment to applicants who demonstrate strong connections to the local community or have received endorsements from influential figures. Correct answer is A. A holistic review considering academic achievements, extracurricular involvement, personal essays, and demonstrated critical thinking skills, assessed against the university's stated admissions criteria. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the university's commitment to academic integrity with the need to fairly assess applicants. The pressure to admit a certain number of students, coupled with the potential for subjective interpretation of application materials, necessitates a rigorous and unbiased evaluation process. Careful judgment is required to ensure that all applicants are treated equitably and that the admissions process adheres to established guidelines. The correct approach involves a comprehensive review of the applicant's academic record, extracurricular activities, and personal statement, with a specific focus on identifying evidence of critical thinking, problem-solving skills, and alignment with the university's values and academic standards. This approach is justified by the American University of Paraguay's entrance exam guidelines, which emphasize a holistic assessment designed to identify candidates with the potential to succeed in their chosen fields of study and contribute positively to the university community. Adhering to these guidelines ensures fairness, transparency, and the selection of well-qualified individuals. An incorrect approach that relies solely on the applicant's high school GPA and standardized test scores fails to capture the full spectrum of a candidate's abilities and potential. This overlooks the qualitative aspects of an application, such as the applicant's motivation, resilience, and unique perspectives, which are crucial for academic success and personal growth. Such a narrow focus could lead to the exclusion of promising candidates who may not excel in traditional metrics, but possess other valuable attributes. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes applicants from specific socioeconomic backgrounds or with particular affiliations, without a clear basis in the university's stated admissions criteria, constitutes a violation of fairness and equal opportunity principles. This introduces bias and undermines the integrity of the admissions process, potentially leading to the selection of less qualified candidates over more deserving ones. A third incorrect approach that involves making admissions decisions based on informal recommendations or personal biases, rather than objective evaluation against established criteria, is ethically unsound and professionally unacceptable. This erodes trust in the admissions process and can lead to arbitrary decisions that do not serve the best interests of the university or the applicants. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a commitment to the established admissions framework, a thorough understanding of the evaluation criteria, and a dedication to objective assessment. Professionals should actively seek to mitigate personal biases, engage in collaborative review when appropriate, and always prioritize fairness and transparency in their decision-making. When faced with ambiguity, seeking clarification from supervisors or referring to the official guidelines is paramount. Question 20. Cost-benefit analysis shows that a proposed new interdisciplinary program at the American University of Paraguay could significantly increase tuition revenue within 3 years, but also requires substantial upfront investment in specialized equipment and faculty training, potentially diverting funds from existing departments. Which approach best addresses the multifaceted impact of this proposal within the university's operational and ethical framework? Option A. Prioritize the projected tuition revenue increase, assuming that any initial resource diversion will be temporary and offset by future gains, and proceed with program implementation after securing the necessary funding. Option B. Conduct a comprehensive impact assessment that evaluates not only financial projections, but also the program's alignment with the university's strategic goals, its potential effects on student learning and faculty workload, and its compliance with Paraguayan educational regulations. Option C. Focus solely on the upfront investment costs, arguing that the potential revenue is speculative and that preserving existing departmental budgets is paramount to maintaining current academic standards. Option D. Implement the program on a pilot basis in a single department to gauge student interest and faculty capacity before committing to full-scale investment, without a broader assessment of institutional-wide implications. The correct answer is A. Prioritize the projected tuition revenue increase, assuming that any initial resource diversion will be temporary and offset by future gains, and proceed with program implementation after securing the necessary funding. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the potential benefits of a new program against its associated costs, while also considering the ethical implications and the specific regulatory environment of the American University of Paraguay. The challenge lies in ensuring that any decision made is not only financially sound, but also aligns with the university's mission, values, and the legal framework governing educational institutions in Paraguay. A thorough impact assessment is crucial to avoid unintended negative consequences and to ensure responsible resource allocation. The correct approach involves a comprehensive impact assessment that considers a broad range of factors beyond immediate financial gains and losses. This includes evaluating the program's potential effect on student learning outcomes, faculty development, institutional reputation, and long-term sustainability. It also necessitates adherence to any relevant Paraguayan educational regulations or guidelines that might govern the introduction of new academic programs or the allocation of university resources. This approach is ethically sound as it prioritizes the educational mission and the well-being of the university community, and it is professionally responsible by ensuring a holistic and forward-thinking decision-making process. An incorrect approach would be to solely focus on the quantifiable financial benefits, ignoring qualitative impacts such as potential strain on existing resources or negative effects on student experience. This fails to consider the broader responsibilities of an educational institution and could lead to decisions that undermine the university's core purpose. Another incorrect approach would be to disregard any potential negative impacts on faculty morale or workload, focusing only on perceived student demand. This overlooks the crucial role of faculty in delivering quality education and could lead to operational inefficiencies and ethical concerns regarding employee welfare. A third incorrect approach would be to proceed without consulting relevant Paraguayan educational authorities or internal university governance structures, thereby risking non-compliance with local regulations and internal policies. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with clearly defining the objectives of the proposed program. This should be followed by identifying all potential stakeholders and their interests. A thorough assessment of both positive and negative impacts, both tangible and intangible, should be conducted. This assessment must be grounded in the specific regulatory and ethical context of the American University of Paraguay. Finally, decisions should be made based on a balanced consideration of all gathered information, prioritizing the long-term health and educational mission of the institution.